Yes, indeed, folks, you listen to Blue Please here on WoW Radio. Oh no, he's saying bad things about the game. Yeah, you want to know why? Because it's not very good at the minute. Good lord, if you don't like the truth, go listen to the WoW Insider show or something. They wouldn't know what the truth was if they friggin' found it up their arse. And Jesus. We've got that site. It's funny, I read that site. I mean, it's so unprofessional to say really bad things about another site on the air, apparently. Evidently, it's also unprofessional to say bad things about Blizzard on the air. Oh, journalistic integrity. This is the same site that thinks controversial is a word. Gah! We're so happy joy about WoW right now. No, we're not. We really aren't. I mean, seriously. We are not happy about WoW because right now, it's not very good. For a good chunk of the player base. Big issues with it. I mean, you know, do you want me to reel off the issues with WoW right now that are really getting my goat? We've got past the stage where everything was awesome. Because leveling was very, very good. I mean, don't get me wrong. The leveling experience was great. Most of the instances were pretty fun. The rep stuff's great. A lot of good stuff. But, I mean, we've got a state where now where the crafting system is utterly broken in pretty much every respect. You can't craft anything that's worthwhile. Making a profit from professions relies on 2 or 3 gimmick items, or crafting an entire base, entire kind of profit base on a server like I have, for instance, where I've got suppliers and all that kind of thing. And to be honest, the game doesn't provide good tools to do that anyway, and there are plenty of games which have better economic models. So crafting's out the arse. PvP's out the arse at the moment, apparently, because there's too much burst damage and not enough resilience. Resilience isn't playing good enough role, so we're getting people that are pouncing around in tier 7.5 just because the resilience makes so little difference at level 80, and there's not enough of it on the gear. You can't even cap it out, even in full deadly. It's just silly. I mean, arenas were always a mini-game, but to be honest, they're even worse now. And then we've got PvE where everyone can clear in a pug. What are you supposed to do? Someone tell me how I'm supposed to have fun in the game at the minute. Because I'm not. The only fun I'm having in the game right now is leveling up to do Molten Core again. That demonstrates there's something horribly wrong. Now, if you do not like being faced with that fact, you know, and a lot of people listening to this show are not just fanboys that'll blindly accept everything I say, and I would hope not. I really would. I don't want people who blindly accept everything I say. It's just a really bad idea. It's just sad that it's got to this stage. I mean, it really is. There's another game coming out, actually, relatively soon, called Darkfall, that I'm probably going to be giving a shot, because it's got a good amount of player-created content, nice dynamic world. It's going to give that a try, and if not, you know what, I might go try Lord of the Rings Online, because the new expansion's got a really, really good set of reviews, and I believe there's a legendary item system that involves socketing and leveling up these items, which are quite nice, and there's some good raids and stuff like that, so, you know, I might go try that out. It's not really unhealthy to take a break from WoW at any point, but usually, and hopefully, you take a break for reasons other than the fact that the game has completely run out of reasons to play it. Now, one of the reasons that you would have come back to play Wrath, I suppose, would be the introduction of the Death Knight. Though, I must say, after a month and a half, I have yet to see Death Knights have any meaningful impact on the game at all. Now, I was concerned about Death Knights when I saw them. I mean, initially, yes, there was a big wow factor. They were very cool, you know. But I thought after that, well, what role do they really perform? I mean, the initial argument was, oh, well, we need them for tank. It's like, well, we don't really. Not anymore. We've got 3 very viable tanking classes that are all good. They all do exactly what they say on the tin. Paladins are great at tanking. Warriors are great at tanking. Druids are great at tanking. Do we really need a 4th tanking class? Well, from what I've seen, no. I've not really seen any proper tanking spec DKs fulfill any kind of role. We're still desperately looking for tanks on our server a lot of the time when it comes to doing pug raids and stuff like that. Most DKs don't want a tank, and they never rolled them to that class to tank to begin with. So I do wonder, it's like, well, okay, what does it bring to the raid? DPS? Well, there's a lot of DPS classes. And to be honest, DK DPS ain't that great. They're not all that high on our damage meters, that I can tell you, and our DKs are very well geared. So I'm not really sure why they brought them in. Looking at the raid game, for instance, it hasn't changed the raid game at all. Not from what I can tell. And there's, of course, a reason for that. In the next segment, we're going to be talking about the idea of bring the player, not the class, which I think is a rather ironic policy, quite frankly, to bring in when you've just brought in a new class, and they're trying to find their place, only to realise, actually, we don't need you. Because we don't really need any specific classes. We need tanks, healers, and DPS. Doesn't matter what they are. We don't need the buffs that they give. We don't need the auras or the blessings or anything like that, because the content isn't tuned to the level where we actually need this kind of thing. Heck, the last time I saw anyone pop a flask was just as a joke. So, I'd like to hear your feedback on this. Have you had any good experiences with DKs? We're going to make the next 10 minutes a little bit of a feedback segment. You can email me on themurloc@gmail.com. I'd like to hear about your experiences with DKs. Themurloc@gmail.com. Email me with your experiences with DKs. And I'd like to know if you play a DK, if you're finding your place in the raid game. Maybe if you played against DKs in arenas, that kind of thing. Do they add anything to an arena team? I mean, I suppose they would. I mean, they're good, don't get me wrong. They're also very annoying, I must say, because they resurrect as a ghoul and all that kind of thing. Yeah, it's shaken up the arena game a little bit, but not by much. I mean, they're yet another melee DPS class that have a couple of nifty abilities. Like the ghoul thing. They're a melee DPS class with a pet and an anti-magic shell. Nothing else in particular, really. So yeah, email me, themurloc@gmail.com, with your experiences. I suppose it's kind of indicative of the system that we've currently got in WoW, that these classes just don't add anything to the game, because the game's not varied up enough for that to happen. Here's the problem with adding new classes to WoW. If you add new classes to WoW, they have to have a role, a specific role, otherwise there's no reason to take them to raids, and raids are the only meaningful content in WoW at this point in time. And if you argue that battlegrounds are, then I'd like to laugh you off the face of the planet, and arenas, quite frankly, are a joke right now. I can't remember the last time anyone cared about competitive arena play in Wrath. Maybe once they start getting the seasons rolling, or maybe they revamp the system so that it actually makes sense in some respect. Maybe bring in the spectator aspect of it, because you'd think that would be what it would all be about. If it's going to be competitive, then you want it to be an esport, then you've got to have people watching, which of course you can't do, unless you're dead. The problem is that WoW's just not varied enough. The encounters aren't varied enough. Nothing in Nax requires you to bring any specific class. You just need tanks, DPS, and healers. Yeah, sure, it helps a little bit to have a specific class. It helps to have a Wrestler Druid here and an Enhancement Shaman there and stuff like that, but you don't need them. You don't even need Shadow Priests anymore, who are perhaps the most unique of roles. They came along and it's like, hey, we can regen mana. We're the only guys that can do that. No, actually, not anymore. Ret Palace can do it now, and Survival Hunters. It's the homogenization coming into play, and it's now showing. You know, I did say it would get to this point, and to be honest, as far as I can tell, I was right. It's got to the point where everything's become so bloody homogenized that absolutely nothing makes a difference anymore. Now, I've got an email here from Nebby in Kulturas, and he says this regarding Death Knights. When the expansion came out, the first thing I did was level my Death Knight to 80. After the initial rush of excitement, I quickly found out that the class was overshadowed. When it comes to raids, if there's a slot for DPS, I'm ignored, and a better DPS class is picked. The fact that DKs are supposed to be tanks is a joke, and our server at least have yet to see one. I mean, you know, I've had DKs tank before, but I'll be honest, I pull more aggro when I've got DKs tanking, and it's a total nightmare. I mean, it really is. I've not had any good experiences with DK tanks. And it makes me think, well, most tanks, the three tanking classes, all really had specific roles. I mean, back in TBC, for instance, you got bear tanks who were good at certain encounters more so than warriors were, just because of their immensely high HP and armor. You know, they had more armor, they had more HP, they had less mitigation, but they were able to take the bigger hits, so they were used in some instances. And then, of course, you got paladins who were great. You know, they were really good with AoE tanking, so they were used there. And then, of course, you had warriors in the traditional role. And there were some encounters that served better with a pally tank, some with a DK, what am I thinking? A druid tank, a warrior tank, that kind of thing. But I'm not seeing that anymore. I'm not seeing a case where it's like, oh, we definitely need a DK tank for this fight. No, we don't. We don't need any kind of tank. I've got a couple more emails here. Scott Whiten, also known as Scottus from Shannon Castle, says this: hey, never emailed before. My guild has been doing very well with the Death Knight main tank. Last night we 10-lined regular nax, with a few pokes and cleared the Arachnid and Plague quarters, as well as Patchwork and Vesuvius without any wipes. It's been quite enjoyable. Yeah, but, I mean, I've got to ask you there, what did it add to the raid, aside from being a tank? What's so unique about it? Hello, TB, this is from Narlock of Frequency. He says this: as a rogue turned Death Knight, I decided to continue with my tradition of hitting things with sharp objects. We've also had a Shaman re-roll the tank DK, so I'll give you a basic rundown. Myself, I just do some respectable, but not particularly high damage, but decent, pew-pew, and provide enhancement Shaman buffs. And he says that my DKs are doing something rather wrong. Now, this is the problem. They're doing something rather right, and so is everyone else. Hunters just out-DPS them. As a mage, I out-DPS DKs. Simple as that. Titan's Grip Warriors out-DPS DKs. Rogues out-DPS DKs. I think the only things that don't out-DPS DKs are Warlocks, but that's because they really suck right now. Our tank DK is very good, and the problem is the spiky damage he takes in comparison with our bear, so we're only off-tanks most days. That's pretty much it. Though in arenas we have insane survivability and burst makes us god. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, they're great. In arenas, they're kind of interesting. But in raid content, the real content, does it make a difference? I mean, come on, I'm going to keep going through these emails until I find some people who can actually give me a reason why DK should be in the game right now. Greetings, Mr. Biscuit. This is from Cine, and he says this: my experience with Death Knights wasn't that good the first time. Most have had no single chance in TBC endgame and never got in a proper raiding guild rolled Death Knights, so when the majority of the Death Knights have got unexperienced, skill-lacking players, well, it's not so good. Easy to play, hard to master. Well, I mean, our DKs know what they're doing. I mean, they re-rolled and they were Kill Jaden Raiders. They know what they're doing. They don't really add anything to the raid. All of our DKs, they're good, don't get me wrong, they're good players, but it's like, okay, you can do this. And your DPS isn't as good as these guys. And your tanking's not as good as these guys, and you can't heal, so what are you for again? Hey TB, Robert from Blades Edge EU, and I'm in the guild called Phoenix. He says this: we have several DKs, and to be honest, most of them are just alts of people who want a new class to play around with. We have one DK to a raid, and to be honest, a hunter or a rogue could easily fill in for the DK. In my opinion, DKs are just another DPS class, and there's nothing heroic about them. Well, again, I would agree with that. I mean, there's nothing particularly heroic about DKs at all. I don't know why they call them hero class. They might as well just introduce them as a new class. The problem is that they don't add anything to the game. Not in the current state. If they were brought in TBC or even in Old World, yes, they would have added something, because those fights would have required some of the abilities that they have. There would have been fights where DK was better tanking, and indeed it could have been a make or break, but not anymore, because, well, the content's too easy. He says, I've yet to see a proper DK tank, because our only DK tank is still busy getting good enough gear to get next 10 man. Oh dear. Death Knights. This is from Private Vice. He says, in my experience, there have been no Death Knights that have given anything that we don't already have. I first thought this was due to the learning curve, as they're a brand new class, it would be hard to come by a good tank. But talking about DKs in general as a class, they seem to be good as an anti-magic tank, which we didn't really have. But also I haven't seen any content where we need an anti-magic tank. So yes, it does bring a new kind of tank, but in current content, no, they're not needed. Here's an interesting one. This is good, I like this. This is from Jessica of Ravencrest EU, says, Death Knights are wonderful for one special encounter, that being Sartheron with 2 or more Drakes alive. Their ability to rotate their many cooldowns for the breath, which hits for up to 70k. Aha, well there you go, there's one encounter that uses it, that's good. About Death Knights, this one is from Brian Rodrera Pedersen. Crazy name, I like that, it's very good. Greetings to me from the Polar Ice Undead Mage on Kultures EU. My opinion about Death Knights is there's only one place in raiding where they show themselves, and that's the Malagos encounter in Phase 1, where they're great at pulling the power sparks. Otherwise, they're just there. Now, I must say that in Malagos, we never had the problem with the power sparks. I just wait for them to come and frost over them, and then they get killed. I mean, I suppose it would be kind of helpful, but it's certainly not necessary. So yeah, I mean, overall, from the emails that I've got, aside from the Sartheron 2+ Drakes comment, which was great, that's nice. That gives me a little bit of hope. Seeing that happens, it might be, okay, maybe some of the Ulduar stuff is really going to require you to bring specific classes. Maybe that's what's going to happen. The problem is, right now, that, again, we're stuck with no content, and we don't know when Ulduar's coming. And I will put money on 3 months. I really will. I mean, they haven't even got patch 3.0.8 out the door, and to be honest, that isn't even looking like too impressive a patch. It's going to be ages before they properly bring out this instant. So unless they spring it on us next week, which don't get me wrong, I'd be over the moon if they did that. It's not going to happen. I'd like it though. So if there's any work experience guy working at Blizzard that can just, push the instance out there just a little bit early, that would be nice. It might get you fired, but it's just the way of it. You got to take one for the team, as it were. All those raiders will really appreciate it. My name's been Total Biscuit. You listen to Blue Please on WoW Radio. In fact, my name is still Total Biscuit. I've got a track for you, and I'll be right back after this. Enjoy.